Before you scroll past this, stop for a moment and like this video, subscribe, and share it with someone who underestimates courage. Because what you are about to witness will challenge every assumption about strength, honor, and what it truly means to be a warrior. It began when a highly decorated foreign Navy officer arrived in the Philippines for a joint military exercise, a man known worldwide for decades of service, strategic brilliance, and countless hours training elite forces. He had seen soldiers from every corner of the globe, faced countless threats, and believed he had mastered the measure of a true warrior. Yet, the moment he saw Filipino troops preparing for drills, a wave of skepticism and disbelief swept over him. He whispered to his aides that these men and women could never be real warriors, that their movements were too fluid, too improvised, too unconventional, that they lacked the rigid forms, the perfect stances, and the disciplined repetition that he believed defined combat excellence. Some Filipino soldiers felt the sting of his words. Some bristled at the arrogance, yet most maintained calm, knowing that true skill rarely responds to provocation. As the drills began, the officer's skepticism deepened. He expected chaos, hesitation, failure. Yet what he witnessed was nothing short of extraordinary. Soldiers moved with a rhythm that seemed effortless, their strikes and counters flowing seamlessly, footwork continuously adjusting to maintain balance and control. Each movement precise yet adaptive, every action responding instinctively to the environment and the intentions of their peers. The officer's initial confidence wavered, and when controlled sparring was introduced, he prepared to demonstrate his skill and dominate, assuming his formal training would overwhelm these unassuming fighters. Yet each attempt to strike was met with unexpected counters, evasive maneuvers, and subtle angles that deflected power. His speed and strength were insufficient. Every attack read and neutralized by timing, perception, and adaptability. The room that once buzzed with doubt grew silent, tension thick as realization dawned. The officer saw that what he had assumed to be chaos was adaptive intelligence, forged over centuries of history, survival, and necessity. The Filipino combat style had been shaped by ancestors defending villages against invaders, navigating dangerous coastlines, and learning to survive with minimal resources. Each technique was not theory, but a living memory. Every movement, a story, a lesson, a tested solution to life or death challenges. As he continued to observe, the officer asked questions, learning how empty-hand movements mirrored weapon strikes, how footwork trained both defense and escape, how patience was as critical as aggression. The lessons accumulated not in a dojo of perfection, but in environments demanding flexibility. The officer, humbled, began participating in drills, feeling firsthand how Filipino fighters read. His intentions adapted instantly and responded in ways that no rigid training had prepared him for. His ego began to crumble, replaced with awe and curiosity. He realized that his measure of a warrior had been too narrow, that survival, adaptability, and mental acuity were as important as technique. By the third day, he no longer saw these troops as inexperienced or inferior. He saw a living, breathing system of combat intelligence, honed by generations who had lived, fought, and thrived in unpredictable conditions. And as he stood amidst the soldiers, observing their calm focus, their readiness, and their instinctive control of space, he finally understood that a warrior's true power is not in appearances, titles, or rigid forms, but in the ability to adapt, survive, and overcome when circumstances are chaotic. The demonstration ended, not with domination, but with mutual respect. The officer bowed, publicly acknowledging that he had misjudged the Filipino fighters, admitting that their training, resilience, and strategic intelligence had taught him lessons he could never have learned in his own environment. The story spread quietly, inspiring soldiers, martial artists, and civilians alike, proving that courage and skill are not dictated by heritage or formal rank. And if this story changed how you see strength, don't stop here. Like this video, subscribe for more stories that challenge assumptions, and share this with someone who still underestimates the heart, intelligence, and adaptability of people who have survived against the odds. As the days passed, the Navy officer began to witness the depth of Filipino training beyond what any outsider could imagine. He observed early morning drills along the shoreline, where soldiers practiced balancing on uneven sands, dodging incoming waves while maintaining stances and grip on weapons. He saw how their movements were designed not only to strike, but to anticipate the chaos of real combat, each soldier learning to adjust instinctively to shifting terrain, wind, and opponent behavior. He watched hand-to-hand combat sequences where strikes flowed like water, blocks transitioned naturally into counters, and footwork constantly shifted to maintain leverage and safety. He realized that every drill, every repetition, had layers of strategy embedded, not just muscle memory. And the history behind these techniques was woven into every motion. Elders explained that generations had refined these skills to survive raiders, colonial armies, and pirates, and that the Filipino fighters' adaptability came from centuries of real battles rather than staged competitions. The officer began participating more actively, testing his own assumptions, and each encounter revealed a new lesson. Attacks he thought would land were anticipated and neutralized. Counters came from angles he hadn't expected, and defensive maneuvers were executed with calm precision. He began to understand that what he had once dismissed as casual or chaotic was in reality a complex understanding of distance, timing, and psychology. It was a system built for unpredictability and survival, not exhibition. He saw the mental toughness required to remain calm under pressure, the awareness to read an opponent's intentions, and the patience to wait for the right moment to act. This mental discipline impressed him as much as physical skill, and he began recording his observations, asking questions about training methods, weapon integration, and historical evolution. He was eager to understand how Filipino fighters had managed to create such an effective and adaptive combat system outside of formalized schools. And as he listened to stories of resistance against invaders, of villagers protecting their homes with limited resources, and of martial traditions passed down quietly through families, he realized that the Filipino approach was not just about fighting, but about survival, intelligence, and resilience. He saw parallels between battlefield, strategy, and everyday life, understanding that these techniques prepared fighters for chaos far beyond controlled drills. He observed how instructors emphasized awareness, observation, and adaptability, teaching students to detect subtle changes in stance, breathing, and intent, and how even minor mistakes could be exploited. The officer, who had once laughed at the seeming informality, now absorbed every detail with reverence. His perception of combat, discipline, and leadership evolving with each passing day. By the end of the first week, he was no longer an outsider. Judging skill by appearances, he was a student learning from a living tradition shaped by hardship, courage, and ingenuity. And the bond between him and the Filipino fighters grew, built on respect, shared effort, and the realization that both had knowledge to offer. He began demonstrating his own techniques, and in doing so, learned how Filipino training amplified strengths while exposing weaknesses. He noticed how their fluidity countered rigid forms, how unpredictability overcame linear strategy, and how mental flexibility often determined the outcome. Before a single strike landed, the officer's reports back home began to shift. He emphasized not only the technical skill, but the mindset, culture, and resilience embedded in every Filipino warrior. And quietly, word spread among other military personnel and martial arts communities that these troops possessed. Intelligence and adaptability that many had overlooked. The narrative that Filipinos were not warriors began to crumble, replaced by stories of courage, precision, and strategic brilliance that defied previous assumptions. And through this experience, the officer himself transformed, understanding that true mastery is not claimed by ego, titles, or lineage, but by the ability to survive, adapt, and thrive under unpredictable conditions. And if this story has challenged your perception, don't let it stop here. Like this video, subscribe for more. Stories that reveal the hidden strength of people underestimated by the world, and share it with someone who believes power only comes in one form, because the heart of a warrior is often found where no one expects it.